My name is Cynthia Mason. I am a visual artist and I live and work in St. Petersburg, Florida. I make soft sculptural paintings and mixed media constructions that scrambles the spatial and material codes of painting and sculpture. I was trained as an architect and I'm greatly influenced by my environment. Being outside to observe space and nature is essential to my practice. The intense sunlight and the abundance of flora and fauna encapsulated within our brilliant blue Florida skies have me looking closely at the landscape and the space it holds. My intention is to understand and capture the idea of atmosphere or space that at first glance may seem invisible or empty. Travel and displacement are essential to my studio practice. Navigating and interpreting new landscapes heightens my awareness and observational skills. It leads to new subjects to research, such as the history of the area I'm working in, its indigenous people, and its geological landmarks. Many of my biggest breakthroughs in the studio have occurred through the gift of travel through artist residencies. There is something about being removed from one's daily habits and routines and being placed into a new space where the rhythms and sensations of the land are totally different. I am fascinated with the visual language of landscapes that I have been collecting since going to my first rural residency in Banner, Wyoming at the Gentile Artist Residency Program. Being displaced from the tropical paradise of Florida into the vast rolling hills of Gentile was transforming, instilling the role of displacement into my practice. The visual chemical reactions found at Yellowstone National Park amazed me, and they still do to this day. New Mexico is another magical landscape that has transformed the way I see space. Its pearlescent, like snow globe atmosphere has a lot in common with Florida's. They both have this really otherworld, kind of prehistoric feel to me. I was honored to spend November 2020 at Carrizozo Air, located in Carrizozo, New Mexico. Driving to New Mexico from Florida during the pandemic was an eerie and invigorating journey. I felt so lucky to be out in a vast landscape, making my way towards new creative spaces. There's an explorational feeling that happens to human beings when we become displaced, and I'm always craving this feeling in daily life and in my studio. While on residency in Carrizozo, I focused on making smaller porcelain and linen constructions. I started each construction with porcelain lines, shapes, and grids that formed the structure or foundation of each piece. Here in the piece Pastoral View, completed while in residency at Carrizozo, I used porcelain grids to create a fence-like structure with a painted linen support that holds the porcelain in place. In the fold 3, the painting is in the process of folding and unfolding. The porcelain grid folds in on itself with a painted linen form, holding it all together. Our world is built of fragile systems that are in a constant state of movement and change. I am greatly inspired by the grid, architecture, early forms of writing, and the failure of human-made systems. I use the grid as a main starting point in everything I do. As a former architecture student in the 1990s, the grid was drilled into my being. It's how I understand and transform space, color, shape, and form. Throughout history, the grid has been used to navigate space, chart new territories, and to dominate and control. I am really interested in using the grid as a point of reference for humans' repeated failure to the environment and to ourselves. The Cartesian grid, as you'll see, plays a large role in my work. I'm fascinated by issues of private versus public space and coded systems of power in modern daily life. Gridding space gives human beings control over one another through our environment. My work is a parallel to the hidden classifications of power and how we are subtly controlled through consumerism and user-based behaviors. I will also say that materials and titles are an integral part of my practice. I consider them to be a point of conversation with the viewer, where I sometimes use dark humor as a connection point. My materials are also a nod to an action, an activity, or a moment in time. For example, I use shredded documents to stuff the work. This idea of dishonesty and cover-ups that plagues human existence, I really want to reference that with the work. In aristocratic limp grip with arms, I used marble dust to rub into the surface so it appears dusted and powdered like an aristocrat. This idea of classic marble sculptures disintegrating and turning to marble dust is what I'm after here. Also, I'll say that gravity is my best friend. I really love a sagging form because it can imply so much: a slouch, a failing structure, a lapse of time. I use gravity to create an analogy to the human-made systems that we see struggle and sometimes fail. Color application is another element that shifts with the work. An aristocratic limp grid with arms, I wanted the 2 pink circles of color to feel soft and blush-like, and it took many, many layers of building up and knocking back that blush color to get it exactly as I wanted it. Velvet beauty marks pox the surface of this sculpture, which is a subtle reference to the falsehoods of the aristocracy. Bloated and bulging canvases are stuffed with handfuls of shredded documents and recall the dishonesty of big business and corporate cover-ups. Through visual puns and productive misuse of materials, my work finds humor and beauty in the face of human-born catastrophe brought on by man's insecurity over his own inadequacies. These works also blend human appendages like arms, legs, and phalluses with animal and natural forms. They evoke catastrophes, both natural and artificial, where drooping canvas, glittering marble dust, shredded documents, and earth tone paints portray themes including the instability of our infrastructure, the inadequacy of our traditions, and humans' fraught interaction with the natural world. In limp pricks and plants and rising water, I wanted the viewer to feel the various water levels that we face due to global warming and climate change. I dip dive this piece for the intended rising water level effect using a tripod gain and deer hoist. I used 5 colors with 8 rounds of dipping. The layering of the fabric dye, gesso application, and sanding created beautiful variations with the color. The long vertically hanging strands of small phalluses in the shape of tree roots serves as signifiers to equate man's continued destructive effects on the environment with his own inadequacies. Large swaths of canvas are dip dyed to appear stained, as if left behind after a flood has receded. In 2020, I was awarded an artist-in-residence grant at the Wurlitzer Foundation in Taos, New Mexico. Each resident is given their own casita with adjoining studio to work in. While at the Wurlitzer Foundation, I completed many new larger soft canvas sculptural paintings that hung on the wall and drooped onto the floor. Limp Grid with Structure was a piece created at the Wurlitzer Foundation and has large cavities that recall the shapes of caves, such as those at Lascaux and Chauvet, where abstraction was born and humanity's first images were created. Blotches of dark brown and faint pink make its surface seem battered and bruised, as if it's been through a difficult ordeal. Black and white striped porcelain rods with rubber hooves grip the floor, supporting the cave-like openings. The subjects I deal with in my work always arise from my environment, daily activities, and explorations. Research and materials are also important to my process. I am always researching the various topics I encounter in daily life, whether it is from walks in my natural environment or the relationship of political history to popular culture, or figuring out the right material to get the piece to droop in the right way. Researching is a huge part of my process. One of my recent works from 2021, called Snakebite, is a great example of how my daily interactions with Gadsden's Don't Tread on Me flag led to my researching its history, which goes back to early colonial times. Snakebite is a 10 by 8 foot hand-sewn room divider with pink-tipped limp appendages cascading down its body. The image of the rattlesnake was used as white colonialist propaganda between 1751 and 1861 by visual artists Benjamin Franklin and Charles Gadsden. Appropriated from the Cherokee, Delaware, and Creek tribes, early white colonialists tapped into fears of sharing this new unruly landscape with its native inhabitants. Colonial propaganda of the time like this from Louisiana in 1774 depict an indigenous warrior with a serpent tattoo on his chest holding a snake in his right hand and a scalp in his left, suggesting that the serpentine nature and powers of North America indigenous people pose a threat to colonialist safety. The rattlesnake image appropriated from the Native American tribes soon became the primary visual symbol of a nation that optimistic white colonial writers called a second Eden. For further reading, I highly recommend Z.M. Hutchins' essay, Rattlesnakes in the Garden, The Fascinating Serpents of the Early Edenic Republic. What I find really fascinating about making work is how an image can appear but have a completely different meaning in the work. So snake imagery has come back into my work from my research into the ancient paintings of Pompeii. I've actually always had an obsession with these faded wall paintings from ancient life that were buried under a thick carpet of volcanic ash in 79 AD. As much as human beings want to control nature, the ancient Pompeii volcanic eruption is a historic reminder that nature is the ultimate one in control. This Pompeian snake and fig tree appear in my new monumental painting I'm currently working on. This is the view of one of 5 facades that will make up the final piece. The final size will be approximately about 10 by 20 by 10 feet, with locations for the viewer to physically enter this temple-like painting. The soft canvas structure will be suspended from the ceiling with large finger-like appendages that can be moved by the viewer. My studio actually only has 10-foot ceilings, so I've decided I'm going to be building an outdoor scaffolding system that the piece is going to hang from. And I think that my interest in environmental exposure as a visual part of my work will make this, using this outdoor kind of studio space, a really logical next step. The work will be intentionally left outside, fully exposed to the Florida elements, so the environment is left to leave its own mark. One area of study that I find myself going back to over and over again is that of phenomenology, which is the study of the structures of our experiences and our consciousness. Of importance to me is the different ways we engage with our environment and other beings. For example, how we experience space and the physical environment through the range of our senses, our thoughts, and our memories, and then also the physical awareness of our own bodies to the space and to the interaction between other human beings and other animals. I think a lot about this relationship the environment has on our human behaviors, and it's really what drives the majority of what I do. I do see our role as artists as being incredibly important in society. I couldn't imagine a world without art and artifact as a record of our human existence and feelings and memories. It's just so important. I think to record the human condition through a movement of pigment and form and material and movement itself. I think art really transcends time and place, and it's a window into another line of thinking if the viewer is really open to it. I think, art, film, writing, theater, dance, architecture, they're all a window into not only our past, but what's happening now and what is going to be happening in our future. I'm really grateful to be an artist and to be making work and to have a life that supports that. So thank you very much for visiting me in my studio and learning more about my working process.